Soapy sat nervously on his seat in Madison Square Park. There were certain signs that told people winter was coming. Birds started flying south. Women who wanted new warm coats became extra nice to their husbands. And Soapy moved restlessly on his seat in the park. When you see these signs, you know winter is near. A dead leaf fell at Soapy's feet. That was a special sign for him that winter was almost here. It was time for everyone who lived in Madison Square to prepare for the cold. Now, Soapy's mind realized what was happening. Winter had come. He needed to find a way to survive the cold. That's why he moved restlessly on his seat. Soapy didn't have high hopes for the winter. He wasn't thinking about taking a trip on a ship. He wasn't thinking about sunny skies or the warm Bay of Naples. What he really wanted was 3 months in the prison on Blackwell's Island. He wanted 3 months of food every day, a bed every night, and safety from the cold wind and from the police. This seemed to Soapy like the best thing in the world. For many years, Blackwell's Island had been his winter home. Wealthy people from New York made big plans to go to Florida or the Mediterranean Sea during the winter. But Soapy made small plans to go to the island. Now the time had come. The newspapers he had used to keep warm during the night in the park had not helped much. So now, Soapy was thinking about going to the island. There were places in the city where he could ask for food and shelter. He could go from one place to another, and they would take care of him during the winter. But Soapy liked Blackwell's Island better. Soapy was proud. If he went to any of these places, he would have to do things he didn't want to do. They would make him wash his whole body. They would ask him personal questions about his life. He didn't want to do any of that. No, prison was better. In prison, there were rules to follow, but he could still keep his own life. Soapy decided that he would go to the island. There were many easy ways to do this. The easiest way was to go to a nice restaurant, have a big dinner, and then tell them he had no money to pay. They would call the police. The police would arrest him, and he would go to court. The judge would send him to Blackwell's Island, where he would be safe and warm. Soapy left his seat in the park and walked toward Broadway and Fifth Avenue. He crossed the busy street and started walking north on Broadway. He stopped at a big, bright restaurant. This was where the rich people went. He thought that if he could sit at a table, he would look fine. His face was clean. His coat was decent. He thought that if the waiter only saw what was above the table, he would be fine. He imagined the food he would order. It wouldn't cost too much, but it would fill him up and make him happy before he went to prison. But as soon as Soapy stepped inside the restaurant, the head waiter saw his old shoes and the torn clothes on his legs. The waiter quickly turned Soapy away, and strong hands pushed him out of the door. Soapy left the restaurant and walked down the street. He felt disappointed. This was not going to be as easy as he thought. He needed to think of another way to get arrested. He walked a little farther and saw a shop with bright lights and a big glass window. Soapy picked up a large stone and threw it through the window. People started running to the shop. A police officer was the first to arrive. Soapy stood still and smiled. This was exactly what he wanted. The cop would arrest him. "Where is the man who did this?" asked the cop. "Don't you think I might have done it?" Soapy said, smiling. He was ready to be arrested. But the cop wasn't interested in Soapy. When people break windows, they usually run away. The cop saw someone running down the street and ran after him. Soapy felt disappointed again. He had failed twice. Across the street was another restaurant. It wasn't as fancy as the one on Broadway. The people who ate there were not so rich. The food was not as good. But Soapy decided to try this place. He walked in with his old shoes and torn clothes, and no one stopped him. He sat down at a table and ordered a big meal. When he finished, he told the waiter that he had no money to pay. "Call the police," Soapy said, "and don't keep a gentleman waiting." But the waiter just said, "No cop for you." The waiter called another waiter, and together they threw Soapy out of the restaurant and onto the street. Soapy stood up slowly, brushed off the dirt, and realized that prison seemed farther away than ever. He felt like he would never get there. Soapy walked on for a while, then saw a young woman standing in front of a shop window. There was a cop standing nearby. Soapy thought he could talk to the woman and that she would ask the cop to help him. The cop would arrest him, and he would go to prison. Soapy moved closer to the woman and said, "Good evening, Bedelia. Don't you want to come and play with me?" The cop was watching, and Soapy thought this was his chance. The young woman smiled and took his arm. "Sure, Mike," she said. "If you'll buy me something to drink." I would have talked to you earlier, but the cop was watching. With the woman holding his arm, Soapy walked past the cop. But then Soapy felt sad. He was still free. He wasn't going to prison yet. Was he going to stay free forever? At the next corner, Soapy pulled his arm away from the woman and ran. He didn't know why he ran, but it was as if something inside him told him he had to. He walked farther and found himself near some theaters. This part of the city was brighter, and people looked happier than in other areas. He felt a sudden fear. Maybe no cop would arrest him. He kept walking until he saw a policeman standing in front of a theater. Soapy had another idea. He started shouting, pretending to be drunk. He danced and screamed as loud as he could. He hoped the cop would notice and arrest him. But the cop just turned to a man nearby and said, "It's one of those college boys. He won't hurt anyone." We've been told to let them shout. Soapy felt even more hopeless. The cops seemed to ignore him, no matter what he did. He started to wonder if he would ever get to the island. As Soapy walked on, he saw a man buying a newspaper in a shop. The man left his umbrella by the door. Soapy quickly stepped inside the shop, grabbed the umbrella, and started to walk away. The man followed him. "That's my umbrella," the man said. "Oh, is it?" Soapy said. "Why don't you call a cop?" "I took it. There's one standing at the corner." The man didn't seem sure about what to do. Soapy walked slowly, but he had a feeling he wasn't going to get arrested this time either. The cops saw them, but didn't care. The umbrella man walked away quickly, and the cop helped a woman cross the street. Soapy felt even farther from the prison he wanted. Soapy continued walking toward Madison Square Park. He was tired, but as he passed a quiet corner, he saw an old church. Soft light came from the stained glass windows. Sweet music filled the air. Soapy stopped and listened. The music made him remember a time when his life was different, when he had hope and clean clothes, and when he had friends. Soapy felt something inside him change. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wanted to change his life. He thought that maybe he could become a better person. Tomorrow, he would find work. A man had once offered him a job. Soapy would find that man and start a new life. He would become somebody again. But just as Soapy was thinking about this new change in his life, a police officer grabbed his arm. "What are you doing here?" the cop asked. "Nothing," Soapy said. "You think I believe that?" the cop said. Full of his new energy and hope, Soapy began to argue. But it's not wise to argue with a New York cop. "Come with me," said the cop. The next morning, Soapy stood in front of a judge. The judge sentenced him to 3 months on Blackwell's Island.